Welcome to this week's edition of the Fantasy Football Goon podcast. I'm your host, Joe Mandel, the Goon, and this is Week 4's Stardom and Situm. This week I'm going with one of the hottest quarterbacks in football right now as my start of the week. That's no other than Andy Dalton. The guy's going against a beat-up Kansas City Chiefs defense. You saw how terrible their secondary was against the Packers on Monday night. And I think with Dalton having weapons like A.J. Green, Tyler Eifert, even Marvin Jones starting to emerge out there, I think Andy Dalton's just going to have a huge game and is going to put up the yardage and the touchdowns for you to have a great week in fantasy. So if you have Andy Dalton or you need a bye week replacement for a Tom Brady, or if you're starting a Marcus Mariota, definitely start Andy Dalton because he's got a great matchup and he's definitely going to help you out. So do not hesitate to start the Red Rocket. Another quarterback that I'm really liking this week is Derek Carr of the Oakland Raiders going against the Chicago Bears. Carr's gone over 300 yards in his last two games and has really turned it on with Amari Cooper and Michael Crabtree getting all kinds of work. And he's even throwing passes to Latavius Murray out of the backfield. So David Carr's got a great matchup against a terrible secondary from the Chicago Bears. They just traded away Jared Allen. Probably not going to have a huge pass rush. I'm expecting Derek Carr to have a humongous game and be a super valuable fantasy asset down the road. Oakland looks like they have a great offense. Obviously, their defense is still pretty bad, but their offense is playing great through the first three games. Derek Carr is going to put up some big numbers, so start him this week. He will help you, especially if you got a bye. Now let's talk a little bit about quarterbacks that should be riding your bench this week. It seems pretty obvious to me, but I'm going to mention it on here because some people think they have to start him. But I think Matthew Stafford should be on the bench this week. Obviously, he's got a tough matchup against the Seattle Seahawks. You know, he's had two, I want to say bad games, but not great games in San Diego and Minnesota. And, things aren't going to get any easier in Seattle. I mean, Calvin Johnson's been kind of quiet this year, as has Golden Tate. So I don't think the game that he's going to break out is against the Seahawks. So don't start him. It's about as easy as that. Another QB that I think should be riding the bench this week is Teddy Bridgewater. He has not looked great at all this season, and on top of it, he gets the Denver defense that has a great pass rush, and they got Aqib Talib out there, guarding either it's going to be Mike Wallace or Charles Johnson. Just to put it lightly, I don't expect Teddy Bridgewater to do much of anything against Denver. So don't start him. He might get you a few points rushing the ball, but beside that, I don't trust Teddy Bridgewater enough to start him this week, so he should absolutely be on your bench. Moving on to the must-start running backs of this week, I'm going to go with somebody who has not been on many must-start lists at all this year, with Carlos Williams in Buffalo. He gets a New York Giants team, and it looks like LaShawn McCoy is not going to be playing. So that means Carlos Williams gets the start, and on top of it, he gets a big workload. Even if Shady McCoy were playing, Carlos Williams has a touchdown in each of the first three games, and that's when McCoy was playing. So imagine what he's going to do without McCoy in the game. Tyrod Taylor's going to be throwing the ball, but Williams is going to get all the carries. I don't see Boobie Dixon taking away that many carries from him. So I expect big things from Carlos Williams this week. I have him ranked in the top 10 running backs. So you should absolutely pick him up, and you should absolutely have him in your starting lineup. One more running back I love this week is Frank Gore. He gets the Jacksonville Jaguars. And if you take a look at what Dion Lewis and LeGarrette Blount did to them last week, they just absolutely manhandled that team on the ground. So I expect Frank Gore to have a big game. He had his nice rebound game last week, but I really think his coming out party on the Indianapolis Colts is going to be this week against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I expect him to get near 100 yards and probably around 2 touchdowns. So I think Frank Gore will be a very good play for you. He should be in your lineups. I'm starting him over guys like Marshawn Lynch, who's questionable to play anyway. And I just think Frank Gore should be in your starting lineups. So go with him. Some guys you shouldn't be going with this week that should be on your bench are Alfred Blue, for one instance. Blue had a big game last week, but, well, first off, they're saying Arian Foster might be ready to go this week. According to Bill O'Brien, he's a game-time decision. But even if he doesn't play, I just look for Houston to throw the ball a lot against the Atlanta secondary, and I don't expect Alfred Blue to get a lot done on the ground. But obviously with Foster coming back, Alfred Blue his value will continue to fall unless Foster gets hurt again. But I'm expecting Alfred Blue to have very little fantasy relevance going forward. Even if he does start this week, I think this is probably the last week you can start him. But I say avoid him. I say leave him on your bench because there's much, much better options out there. Here's some more guys that should be riding the pine this week. A lot of people are really high on Todd Gurley. I think he is going to be great. He had his first game back last week. He didn't do a whole lot. And, of course, his second game back is at Arizona. They've been tremendous at stopping the run. And Todd Gurley is also still splitting carries. So not only is he going against a good defense, he's splitting carries, and he's on the road. So I just don't see big things happening for Todd Gurley this week. I do think he's going to be a stud going the rest of the season. I just don't think he's worth a start, especially against a tough Arizona Cardinals defense. So keep Todd Gurley on your bench, but don't give up on him because I think he's bound for good things. Moving on now to the wide receiver position. Let's talk about the must-start wide receiver for the week. And for me, personally, it's Dante Moncrief going against the Jaguars. He's been absolutely awesome through the first 3 games. He's been the only Colts receiver that I could classify as playing awesome. He's been getting a ton of targets. He's been making most of the catches that he's targeted on, and he's scoring touchdowns. So, what's there not to love about Dante Moncrief? He's got T.Y. Hilton that's going to draw a lot of coverage. The Jacksonville defense is not good. And Andre Johnson looks fragile, old, and slow. So there's nothing not to like about Dante Moncrief. Get him in your lineups against Jacksonville. You will not be disappointed. Another guy with a great matchup that's, I would say, on the same level as a good matchup as Moncrief is Amari Cooper going against the Chicago Bears. I mentioned earlier that Derek Carr is a must-start against the Bears defense. Well, Amari Cooper going against a terrible Bears secondary makes him a must-start as well. He's been extraordinary the last 2 weeks ever since Pac-Man Jones slammed his helmet into the helmet. It's like he awakened a beast. Love Amari Cooper this week. The Bears defense has been absolutely horrendous. And the Derek Carr, Amari Cooper chemistry is going to be something that we're going to hear about for a long time because those guys are going to be playing together and making big, big plays. Now for some wide receivers that should be on the bench this week. Look no further than the Magic Man, the first Chiefs wide receiver to score a touchdown in God knows how long, Jeremy Maclin. He had a good game against Green Bay, but a lot of that was in garbage time. I just don't think he's going to have any success against Cincinnati. I expect more of the same from the Chiefs. I expect them to be a heavy run game and then throwing, little dink and dunk passes, a few of them to Maclin, but I don't think it's going to be enough to warrant a good start for the week. I think Kelsey's going to do well. I think Jamal Charles is going to do well. And I think that's about it for that offense. So don't start Jeremy Maclin. I don't expect big things from him at all. Another guy I'm expecting to have some regression this week is Rashard Matthews from the Miami Dolphins. while he had a great first 3 weeks of the season, I'm expecting him to have some struggles against the New York Jets. They're playing the game in London. They're all going to be slightly jet lagged. And, of course, they need to win a game really bad. So what I think is going to happen is that Ryan Tannehill is going to be throwing a lot to Jarvis Landry, maybe get Jordan Cameron involved, and you're going to see a lot of Lamar Miller carrying the ball on the ground. I still don't expect Miami to do well. I'm thinking they're going to lose their fourth straight game. But if they're going to win, I think it's going to be in the hands of Jarvis Landry and Lamar Miller. So don't start Rashard Matthews. Try again next week. But for this week, stay away. Now we're getting to the tight end portion of the start 'em and sit 'em. And my favorite starter this week is Martellus Bennett of the Chicago Bears. Taking on the Oakland Raiders, a team that's terrible against the tight end. And, of course, people are going to say, Jimmy Clausen is throwing the ball. I don't care who's throwing the ball. You know how terrible they look. Clausen did look terrible against Seattle last week. But he's going to have another week to prepare. And let's be honest, the Oakland defense is nowhere near the level of the Seahawks defense. So even if they're throwing short passes, I think Martellus Bennett's going to get a lot of targets, and he's going to get yards after the catch. So don't be afraid to start Martellus Bennett. I have him in the top 5. I think he's going to have a big week against the Raiders. And I know a lot of you guys have Rob Gronkowski on a bye this week, and you're kind of stuck when it comes to tight end. But another guy who might even be on waivers, but most likely not, is Jordan Reed from the Redskins. He gets a nice matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles, a secondary that can't really stop anybody right now. And, of course, Jordan Reed is a matchup nightmare because he's a big guy, he's got height, and he's got the athleticism to go up and get a ball. Obviously, Kirk Cousins has to get it to him. You saw last week Cousins overthrew him a bunch of times, but Jordan Reed still had a good game. If he can tighten up some of those throws to Reed, expect Reed to have an even better game this week. I'm expecting him to finally get a touchdown, and I don't have any problem starting Jordan Reed. I think he's going to be a stud, and as long as he can stay healthy, I know it's a big if, but as long as he's healthy, Jordan Reed is going to be in the top 10 for me all the time. Now let's talk about some guys that are not in my top 10 this week, guys that should be sitting on the pine. I really thought Kyle Rudolph was going to have a huge year this year. I sold him high on my pre-draft stuff. I thought he was going to have a nice rebound game last week, and he just continues to disappoint. He's a great tight end, but they don't utilize him in that offense. And of course, on top of all things, he gets the Denver defense, who, we got Talib and all those guys out there. They have a good secondary. They have a good pass rush. It just adds up to a bad performance from Kyle Rudolph. I avoid him at all costs. I've even dropped him in every league I owned him. I just don't have the confidence to start Kyle Rudolph right now, and neither should you. Speaking of guys that I have no confidence in, another tight end that I own in all my leagues is Jordan Cameron. I really thought he was going to have a huge year in Miami, and he still might. I'm not dropping him just yet. I'm going to hold him on my bench, but he gets a tough matchup. They're in London, and of course, they're taking on the New York Jets. So obviously their defense is pretty good. The Jets have been really good against the tight end this year. So I don't expect that to change this week. Jordan Cameron's kind of playing a little bit banged up anyway. He's got that groin issue. He played last week, but he didn't do too well. So I still think he should be on the bench. But don't give up on Jordan Cameron just yet. But I would not start him this week. The last section of Start 'em and Sit 'em is about defense, special teams. I'm not even going to talk about kickers this week because, let's be honest, it doesn't matter. Whoever you start is going to be fine. But on the defensive front, that does matter. That can win or lose you a matchup. So going with my start of the week, I'm going to go on the Indianapolis Colts bandwagon again. The Colts take on the Jacksonville Jaguars. They've been turnover prone. Bortles is still inexperienced. He's learning behind center. He's probably going to throw some interceptions. The Colts defense is just, let's be honest, any team that plays the Jacksonville Jaguars, I love them in fantasy. The Colts defense has underperformed so far this year, and I expect a team like Jacksonville to help put them on track for at least 1 week. So if you need a flyer, you need a team to start on defense, look no further than the Colts for just this week. The Eagles defense played surprisingly well last week, but I still think they should be riding the bench. They get the Washington Redskins, who, yes, have Kirk Cousins under center, and yes, he has thrown 4 interceptions in 3 games, but I just think this Eagles defense is not great. You got Matt Jones, who's starting to emerge out of the backfield there. Even Alfred Morris getting some carries and still being dangerous. And you got Pierre Garçon, you got Jordan Reed. These are big guys that you have to stop. And the Eagles are having trouble stopping anybody right now. So for me, the Eagles are unstartable on defense. And as far as I'm concerned, they should be not owned at all. If you want to take a flyer on a team this week, you can, but you're not getting the recommendation from me because I think the Eagles defense is terrible. Yeah, I said it. I said they're terrible. Those are my main stardom and situms for week 4. Keep that in mind when you set your lineups. Also head over to fantasyfootballgoon.com. I just put up our week 4 rankings for all positions. Also head over to Twitter at FFBGoon. Hit us up with any questions, comments, lineup questions, anything, you name it. We answer all tweets and questions all season long. So reach out to us. We will absolutely help you. Also head over to fantasyfootballgoon.com to the Get in the Game section. We have a spot where you can sign up for our email list. Also subscribe to us on YouTube and like us on Facebook as well. Signing off for fantasyfootballgoon.com, I'm the Goon, Joe Mandel, and good luck in your matchups this week.